kindness can backfire. And Bonnie found herself in the line of fire of Mr. Nolan, who was her friend. A man that knew her better than most people and knew that she will always choose kindness. But he took advantage of that kindness. Now, before we discuss the events that brought us here today, we have to go back at least 20 years to when Mr. Nolan and Bonnie first met. They were 5 years old. They were neighbors, and they were best friends. Inseparable, doing everything together. Sleepovers, going to school together, treats, from the age of 5 to the age of 13, when they had to move. And at the age of 13, their lives separated. And Bonnie went right. She got a degree in mathematics from Michigan State University. And she worked in computer technology. And that career brought her here to the great state of Texarkana. Being one of the few women in her field and in the state, she meets the love of her life. And they have a child together, Gretchen, the center of her universe. And her life, she's doing all the right things. It is also in the state of Texarkana, where she meets up with her friend again, Mr. Nolan, who's also living here too. Until 2 years ago, when her husband leaves her and they get a divorce. And she is forced to sustain and raise Gretchen all by herself. But she is not a quitter. So she finds a job as a high school teacher after she gets laid off. And she tells Mr. Nolan all of these things because they used to talk once a week. So, when September 30th, 2018, Mr. Nolan gives her a call asking for help, it's not strange. And he asked her, hey, I have a friend, Mr. Adams. He's going through a rough time right now. And he's going through a divorce, a bitter divorce. Is there any way you can stay at your house for the weekend? She thinks she's a little apprehensive. She doesn't know him. She lives with her little girl by herself. But she knows what it's like to go through a bitter divorce. And she knows what it's like to want people to help you. So she thinks, hey, just bring him over. We'll see what happens. Come over tomorrow morning. October 10th comes in, and Mr. Adams and Mr. Nolan go over the house. Her brother Robert is there too, just to make sure things are alright. And Mr. Nolan pulls Bonnie to the side and tells her, hey, you're gonna have to kind of keep this a secret. There's some bad guys looking for him, some divorce attorneys, they kind of suck. Just can you, of course, she says. I have no issue with that. What am I gonna tell you? And then that afternoon, she's sitting down with Mr. Adams, and they're getting to know each other, and she tells him how she got a divorce too, how she's left to sustain Gretchen by herself, how she's struggling to pay rent with a high school teacher degree, also because Gretchen recently got sick, and she was stuck with a medical bill by herself. So, Mr. Adams, in an act of kindness, pulls $1,000 and gives it to her, cash, and goes, hey, you're letting me stay at your house, like, please take this money. She's taking it back, but she needs it right now. So then the rest of the weekend they're just hanging out. They're watching TV, they have the blinds open, the lights are on, nothing's changed. It's a regular weekend. And then, on October 3rd, her landlady comes in to collect rent, because she was a little late. Bonnie immediately pulls out the money and gives it to her cash from the money that Adams gave her, thankfully. And Mrs. Richards asks her, hey, who's the man that was sleeping over? Bonnie tells her the truth, just the friend. The next day, October 4th, Mr. Adams asks Bonnie, hey, is there any way you can drive me over to the bus now that I'm done here for the weekend? Thank you so much for letting me stay. Of course, no problem. It's the least she could do. So she goes over to her landlady's house, knocks on the door. asking about her vacuum cleaner to clean up. But before she leaves, she remembers, right, Mrs. Richards, where's the bus stop? And she tells her where the bus stop is. That night, she drops him off, but he has to use the restroom, so she goes over to the ticket counter, buys a ticket for him. They meet up where they last left off in her car, and she gives him the ticket. He goes on his way. And that was it. That's what brought us here. The state has also brought us here on 3 charges. 3 charges that they had told you from opening statement. 1, the intent to cross interstate lines for an illegal activity. 2, an intent to promote illegal activity. And 3, conspiracy for willfully and knowingly harboring a fugitive. They have to prove those 3 charges to you beyond a reasonable doubt. And this burden of proof has entered the courtroom with them, walked down the galley, and sat at government's table, and is going to remain sitting there for the remainder of this trial. They have the burden, we don't. They have to prove this to you, we don't. However, you have the power here today. The power to evaluate all the evidence before you in the form of exhibits, facts, and testimony. And in testimony, you are to determine the credibility of every witness before you. As you heard, the prosecution has 2 witnesses. But what they haven't told you is that 1, their star witness, Jesse Nolan, is here on a grant of immunity, meaning that his involvement in this entire case, and the testimony that he will tell you about his involvement, he will face 0 jail time. Their second witness is Mrs. Richards, who will corroborate everything Bonnie will tell you today. Our witnesses are: 1, you will hear from Bonnie herself, and she will tell you exactly how everything happened. You're also going to hear from Mr. Robert Beasley, her brother, who will also corroborate everything Bonnie's telling you. Now, you will hear throughout this trial their evidence and their testimony. And just as importantly, our evidence and our testimony. And it will show you that this is simply a case of kindness backfiring. And the evidence will draw you to the only conclusion that Bonnie is, in fact, not guilty. Thank you.